Welcome everybody in the 5th MEDICI webinar series with an extremely interesting topic today on children's rights in a digital world. We have two excellent speakers, Odete, Severino and Sonia Livingstone. Miana Carneiro will introduce you later more to what they do and what is their interest in this area. I would just like to say a few words, Miana, if you can please change, about the project. You can see the agenda here. As I said in the beginning, this is our 5th webinar. And our project is based on the need to map the digital inclusion landscape for socially vulnerable groups. As you understand now, and especially the last few months with the COVID-19, it became very, very clear that we're moving very fast into the digital world. But there is always a question about the groups that are socially excluded. What is going to happen now? What is their position in the new world? They are more at risk for dual exclusion. If they cannot have access to digital inclusion, probably they won't be able to have access to social inclusion in this modern society. On the other hand, there are some programs already out there, programs that were funded by the European Union the last 10 years or so, to help the social inclusion, together with digital inclusion of the more vulnerable groups and individuals to happen. So our job is basically to map and identify these programs across Europe and in the UK, to bring them forward and to share them in a knowledge community. So people can learn from each other, perhaps they can develop their own good practices, and even have the opportunity to upload their own good practices and share with researchers, with practitioners, with policymakers in this field. So please do join our knowledge community if you haven't done so, and share also your good practices and experiences with us. Now, just a few things before moving into the agenda and the presentation. First of all, it would be nice if you want to just share in the chat where do you come from, just say hello, because this is an international webinar and we hope to have people from many countries, and we hope that it will be interesting for as many as possible. We have to place you in a listening mode while the webinar is on. So please share your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll try to answer them during the Q&A session. Of course, later you will have the opportunity to see again our webinar, because everything, it is recorded and you can see it later at your own pace and place through the digital inclusion platform. Join our platform and enjoy. Before giving the speech to Miana, just to let you know that fairly soon, in the 30th of September, we're going to develop an online surgery for all of you who are interested to exchange your experiences and ideas about the position and the place of excluded groups in this digital new era. So we will let you know how to join also these events if you want to. And I will move very forward now to Miana and give the floor to her so she can introduce the two speakers that are joining us here today. Miana, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, and thank you very much to all participants for being here today with us. And I will now present the two speakers that we have with us here today discussing around the topic of children's rights and the digital environment. So our first speaker is Odete Severino, who is a senior social policy advisor in the Ministry of Labour, Solidarity and Social Security in Portugal, and an expert in children's rights. She was a vice president of the National Commission for the Promotion and Protection of Children and Young People's Rights. And before that, she was also director for international relations and cooperation from the same ministry. Odete Severino had an active role in the Council of Europe in the framework of the Governmental Committee of the European Social Charter and in the Committee of the Rights of the Child, where she played a decisive role as a member and bureau member, in particular in the Council of Europe strategy on the rights of the child, which included the rights of the child in the digital environment. She has also an independent and public contribution with opinion articles in the written press that constitutes an important input in supplying information and increasing of public investment on children's rights. Our second speaker that we have here today with us is Sonia Livingstone, who is a professor in the Department of Media and Communication at the London School of Economics and Political Science. Much of her research these days is concerned with children's rights in the digital age, and she has advised the UK government, European Commission, European Parliament, UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, OECD, ITU, and UNICEF, among others, on children's internet safety and rights in the digital environment. Sonia currently directs the Digital Futures Commission with the Five Rights Foundation and the Global Kids Online project with UNICEF. She's Deputy Director of the UK-funded Nurture Network and leads work packages for two European H2020 funded projects, Youth Skills and CORE, Children Online Research and Evidence. She's also founder of the EC-funded 33-country EU Kids Online Research Network, and she is a hashtag Safer Internet for EU ambassador for the European Commission. So thank you very much, both Odete and Sonia, for being here. It is such a pleasure to have you both presenting at this webinar around the topic of children's rights in digital environment. And so without further delays, I will give the floor to Odete Severino, our first speaker. I will change now the... You can start, Odete, please.
Okay. I thank you all for being online today and for the kind invitation from Miana Carneiro for being here and have the opportunity of sharing some points that I believe they are important to children's rights in the digital environments. I also take this opportunity because it's a great pleasure being with Sonia Livingstone today. We have known each other for a long time ago. So hi, Sonia. I will start my presentation by saying that 30 years after the adoption of the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child, children's rights have not changed. Miana, can you pass the slide, please? Miana? Okay, thank you. So, as I was saying, children's rights have not changed and they are still clear and objective. It is true that children face new threats to their rights, but they also benefit from new opportunities to realize them. I believe to ensure that no child is left behind and making a reality the sustainable development goals of the Agenda 2030, it is important to recover the spirit, the vision, and the commitment that led to the adoption of the convention in 1989, when the internet was just beginning, and its importance much underestimated. It's true that there are growing uncertainties over how to interpret and implement the convention in relation to the digital environment. But there is no doubt that the UN Convention has lost none of its importance, but it exists in a remarkable, different world to 1989. I believe that the task ahead now is clear. We must focus on the unfinished agenda that will be required to realize children's rights, and in that sense, the digital environment and its effects in children's rights is one of the areas that priority of action is most needed. I must say that with the adoption of a new general comment on children's rights in relation to digital environment. Miana, can you change the slide, please? Okay. Which is now under consultation till 15 of November. It is expected to clarify how digital technology affect the full range of children's rights in a positive and in negative ways. It will set out what governments should do to protect, respect, and realize children's rights online, and clarify the rules and responsibilities of business, parents, educators, and children themselves. Among other issues, I would like to mention the general comment will explore access to information and freedom of expression, education, digital literacy, assembly, culture, leisure and play, privacy, identity and data processing, protection from violence and sexual exploitation, the family environment, parenting and alternative care, and health and well-being. As you can see, there is a wide range of areas that are being under consideration in this new general comment. As such, I believe that general comment on children's rights in relation to the digital environment, when read together with convention and its protocols, form a solid set of ground rules which can assist governments in providing the necessary basis for looking after children's best interests in the complex but a fascinating world of the digital environment. Let me give you some figures. Miana, can you pass the slide, please? Let me give you some figures on online child sexual abuse in the European Union, because I think it's important for our discussion today. As you can see, in the last 10 years, online child sexual abuse increased worldwide, from 1 million reports of child sexual abuse material in 2010 to 17 million in 2019, which include nearly 70 million images and videos, of which more than 3 million images and videos concern cases in the European Union. Children spend twice as much time online as they did 10 years ago. At the same time, in the European Union, reports of online child sexual abuse have increased from 23,000 in 2010 to more than 800,000 in 2019 alone, a number that has increased as a result of the lockdown measures put in place during the coronavirus pandemic. Nearly 90% of the websites are hosted in European Union, especially in Netherlands. According to the last European Union Agency for Law Enforcement Cooperation report, coronavirus has exacerbated existing drivers of online child sexual exploitation and provide new opportunities for abusers. I must say that it is highly regrettable the fact that in 2019, the European Commission had felt the need to write to 23 EU member states, indicating they are considering initiating infringement proceedings against them for failing to implement the EU rules on fighting the sexual abuse and sexual exploitation of children and child pornography. In particular, and according to the European Union, according to the European Commission reports, additional efforts are still required on prevention and on the criminal law provisions and assistance, support, and protection measures for child victims. Miana, can you pass the next slide, please? I must say that I'm confident that the European Commission is now finally taking the lead, and child sexual abuse, both on or offline, is taking a high priority in the European Union agenda. In this context, European Union adopted in July 23rd a new strategy for a more an effective fight against child sexual abuse. This strategy sets out a comprehensive response from the EU to the growing threat to child sexual abuse, both online and offline. Briefly, the key actions covered in the strategy include developing and implementing the right legal framework to protect children and requiring online service providers to detect known child sexual abuse material and require them to report that material to public authorities. The second key action is creating a European Center to prevent and counter child sexual abuse, which will cover prevention, law enforcement, and assistance to victims. Then we have a third area that is also very important in this strategy, that is preparing a prevention network of practitioners and researchers to facilitate the exchange of best practice. And finally, the fourth area, and which is very important in this context, is supporting member states to use effective prevention measures to decrease the number of cases of child sexual abuse in the EU. The strategy is only one of the 5 policy and action streams now taking place broadly with the EU institutions. The other 4 are, and briefly, the development of Digital Service Act. Miana, please, the next slide, okay. So, as I was saying, the other 4 are the development of a Digital Service Act. The Commission is expected to release its proposal for the Digital Act this year. This will represent the most important piece of legislation in digital market. It will propose clear rules framing the responsibilities of digital service to address the risk faced by their users and to protect their rights, including children. The second area that should be considered is the the development of a strategy on the rights of the child, which is expected to be adopted in early 2021. This new strategy will provide for an action-oriented policy framework that gather all internal and external EU actions on children's rights under one umbrella. It will contain a set of measures of the EU to implement and addressing in areas such as the rights of the most vulnerable children's rights in the digital age, the provision of and fight against violence, the promotion of child-friendly justice. The third area that I like to mention, because I believe it is important for the discussion for children's rights in the digital environment, is the continuing work on the e-privacy regulations. The Commission has proposed on 2017 a regulation on privacy and electronic communication to complement the GDPR, or the General Data Protection Regulation, which entered into force in May 2018. More and more Europeans and children also use service such as Skype, WhatsApp, Facebook, Messenger, Gmail, e-message, and it's important to have this kind of supports to be regulated. And finally, the fourth area that I would like to mention, and is related to the previous one, is the implementation of the outcome of the review of the General Data Protection Regulation after 2 years of having entered into force, especially its Article 8, which contains specific requirements regarding consent for the processing of personal data of children. I believe, Miana, the next slide, please. I believe the fact so many initiatives are taking place at the same time in the European Union can have a positive effect in the policy in respect of children as users of the internet. There is an obvious need for high level of coordination, bringing together industry, civil society, law enforcement, and government, including through public and private partnerships, and also to explore the existing tools and mechanisms available at national and EU level. In my opinion, there is no lack of international instruments, guidelines, agreements, or principles that deal with this issue, such internet freedom, accessibility, and respect for human rights. What is needed in what concerns children's rights in the digital environment are not more guidelines per se, but agreed upon principles and priority areas that recognize the responsibility that governments and industry players share to protect children from the risk of a digital world, and to help all the children benefit from the promise of a digital technology opportunities, and making the promise a reality of no children is left behind. Can you, the next slide, please? The next, please. Okay. In that sense, and to conclude my intervention, I would like to outline some priorities action here that seems to me, which together they reflect the core principles that could guide policy making and practical action what concerns children's rights in the digital environment. And these core principles are empower children and young people, support parents and caregivers to help children stay safe online, provide students with a safe online learning experience, make online platforms safe and accessible for children, and ensure that national prevention, response and support services are well functioning. This is what I would like to share with you today in what concerns children's rights in the digital environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Odete, for your presentation and for your contribution today. I will now give the floor to Sonia. I'm sure lots of questions have been uploaded by participants. We will address them all at the end of Sonia's presentation. So welcome, Sonia. Thank you very much for being here. I will give you the floor now. Sonia, can you please unmute your microphone, please?
Yes, I think that worked now. Sorry. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak. I think what I want to say follows very nicely from Odete's framing. She's the lawyer and I'm the psychologist. And so my work has always been focusing on children's experiences, and I've spent the last 10 or 20 years understanding how children's lives are being transformed by the increasing digitalization and datification of our world. So I tend to begin with children's experiences, and as was already said in the introduction, the EU Kids Online Research Project and the Global Kids Online Research Project with UNICEF give me a kind of evidence base from which to speak. And I spend a lot of my time trying to bring the available evidence into the kinds of spaces that Odete was discussing at the European Commission and also internationally. And so I thought I'd offer some reflections from the evidence about why, if you like, why it's taken 30 years, why we are now, I hope, really positively in a good place to develop instruments to realize children's rights in a digital world. But it's been a hard struggle, and I think there is still some hard struggle to come. I'm involved in the drafting of the general comment, working for the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, and I thought I'd give you a little insight into some of the very interesting conversations that result. So I would like to begin with some voices from children, and these in fact come from the consultation with children that was done for the state of the, actually from the day of general discussion that the UN committee held on the rights of the child when it was beginning the process of developing the general comment. And what you'll notice from what children want to say about the digital world, and of course these are just a few examples, is the holistic nature of the way in which the internet and the digital world affect the full range of their rights. So children very often say things like they cannot imagine the world now without the internet, and they cannot imagine their life without it because it's the infrastructure for everything that they do. They are very excited about how it expands and underpins a whole series of their rights and opportunities, contacting and staying in touch with family, education now, because they have access, in principle at least, to all the knowledge in the world. And yet there are some very intense risks that are brought. And the very idea that a child should be asked for their sexual price, I think, is shocking to many. well, to everybody, and of course requires urgent intervention, and children are eloquent on the range of risks that arise for them online. More recently, I think we are all becoming attuned to the last point a girl makes here about how the internet is collecting data on everything that we all do. And for children born into a world in which all their online actions generate data, and interestingly, many of their offline actions, because the internet is watching and data is being collected in many ways, these are some new challenges. So Article 12 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child says children should be consulted in matters that affect them. And I think it's excellent that such consultations are ongoing, including for the present consultation on the general comment on children's rights in the digital world. I just want to offer you a little, hang on a sec. Oh, yes, I just want to offer you a few data points really from the Global Kids Online Network, just to echo the point that was made really in the introduction, which is to say it's easy for us to say all children have access to the internet. Of course, that's not true, and most children in the world still struggle to gain access to the internet. As these figures here show, poorer countries, the struggle is much greater. But even in European countries, for example, we have here Italy and Bulgaria. What we know behind these figures is that there are inequalities you can already see here by age, but also by region, geography, poverty, whether or not children live with their own parents. There are many ways in which behind these averages lie further inequalities. And what the research on digital inclusion shows over and again is that we can think of these digital inequalities at least 3 levels. There is the question of access to the device and the connectivity, the hardware, if you like. There is the question of access to the know-how to really make sure that one can use these devices and make and access different kinds of resources. And then there's what's being called the 3rd level of digital inclusion, which is the capacity to make the digital environment serve one's purposes, do what it is that a child needs to do or that a community needs to do. UNICEF calls this the idea of meaningful access. It's not just a matter of putting a device into a child's hand, but that access should be meaningful in that they can harness it to realize their rights. All of these layers, all the inequalities we know in the traditional offline world that have always limited or even discriminated against some children, we now see those being reproduced online. Nonetheless, children are very confident in saying that they now see access to the internet as a right, or if not as a right, because it's not exactly a right, they see it as really vital for realizing their rights. And we see this very clearly in some data collected by the Prix Jeunesse organization, which asked children around the world how they were using digital media during COVID. And there are 2 graphs I show you here. The one on the left shows very clearly that during COVID, children are using more of many digital media, including notably television, but also mobile phone, YouTube, a range of other devices. And when asked what do they use digital media for during COVID, the graph on the right shows you the different purposes. And I invite you to think very carefully what children are saying when they say, for example, that they are bored, which they are during COVID very often. But what do they want? They really need to be in touch with the people of their lives. They cannot live in isolation. They really rely on technology to find school information, to search for information, and for their emotional needs, when they're lonely, when they're sad, when they're scared. These are all children's ways of talking about the full range of their rights. And in each of these areas, what we really see is how they have come to rely on the internet, especially at a time when, as it were, the outside world has been switched off for so many of them. But of course, the risks are very salient, and they're very salient to policymakers and to parents. And now I show you again some evidence from the Global Kids Online project on the percentage of children in a range of countries, 6 countries, and reporting encountering different risks each year. And I think many have been concerned about children encountering sexual content, and this can be highly problematic. We pay less attention to violent content or to hate speech. We also ask them here about suicidal content and self-harm content. These are different kinds of content. They're expressed and can be found in different parts of the internet, but they all give rise to concern, as of course do many other risks. So these are the kinds of data, these are the kinds of evidence that we can take into fora with policymakers to urge that action is taken. I would nonetheless just say that not all risk leads to harm to children. And as many child rights advocates would also want to say, some measure of risk is necessary for children to learn. And here we see some very difficult decisions on the part of everyone from parents to policymakers. What kind of exposure builds resilience, and what kind of exposure is harmful and is and should be stopped. What we do see in the Global Kids Online project is that when either families or states are very restrictive and very punitive in keeping children, if you like, too safe, they don't gain the kind of resilience, and their opportunities to participate are cut off. So there's some very difficult balancing acts that need to be addressed when we try to think about children's rights in the digital environment. And with that in mind, I want to say something about some of the different rights. Of course, here are all the rights laid out, and many of you will be familiar with them, but they give different rise to different kinds of challenges. So Article 2 really concerns discrimination, that however we realize children's rights in a digital world, there should not be discrimination. And discrimination, children are discriminated against in many ways, and in different ways in different parts of the world. And how it is that we kind of address these in a global digital environment is challenging. Putting the best interests of the child, respecting the best interests of the child, is very difficult in a digital environment that doesn't always know who is a child. And very often an internet user may be a child or may not be a child, and that may or may not be known to the platform, to the provider. So there's many questions about age verification and identification that are proving challenging. Every child, Article 6, the right to life and liberty, of course, is absolutely critical. The right for children to express themselves. Child rights activists are always keen on this, but it is astonishing how rarely children's voice is heard in internet governance processes, in regulation, even, dare I say, by the European Commission when it comes to decide on its General Data Protection Regulation or its Digital Services Act, though perhaps there will be child consultations yet to come. All those civic rights and freedoms, I find that people are often ambivalent when it comes to the internet. They're not so sure that the child should have the right to express themselves anywhere on the internet, that they should have the right to pursue their own beliefs and to meet others as they need to for their freedom of association. There's a lot of very restrictive talk, overprotective talk sometimes about children's civil rights and freedoms online, because we haven't found ways to balance their freedoms and need for protection. Article 16, the right to privacy, has become a very extraordinary challenge now that data is being collected on every like, every search, everything a child does online, and everything that the state and parents and companies do in regard to children online. So data collection and its relation to privacy, and the way in which data are retained for years and aggregated and profiled in order to tailor the user experience. All of these pose very distinct challenges in relation to the digital environment. Freedom from or protection from violence, abuse, neglect, bad treatment. Of course, this is what probably motivates the most policymakers, and in that regard, I would just reiterate Odete's point that in fact this is not yet. We are far from realizing this, and the pace at which internet access is proceeding is well in advance of society's capacity and effectiveness in protecting children, including sexual abuse. The importance of education. I mean, I think, you can get a sense that all of these different, the importance to play, all of the convention rights have very interesting and particular ramifications in the digital world, but the digital world, we know, has been really designed for adults rather than for children. It's a world in which parents are very often disintermediated and have very little kind of capacity to mediate and manage their child's engagement. And it's a world which is largely paid for by major global corporations who have a difficult relation, shall we say, with different states, especially with smaller and less powerful states, in ensuring that digital provision really does respect the needs of children within their jurisdiction. So it's in the sense of the kind of emerging evidence base and some of the struggles to realize children's rights in response to that evidence that I would just end by pointing first to the guidelines that the Council of Europe has already produced, which provides a really kind of wonderful outline, very, very clear outline of where the state's responsibilities and actions lie, and it's very heartening to read in the Council of Europe's 2020 evaluation of the effectiveness of its strategy on the rights of the child that by now already 34 member states have taken distinct action to further realize the rights of the child, specifically in relation to the digital environment. And then I'll end also with the general comment and just urge everyone who's interested to respond to the open consultation. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was a pleasure and a great opportunity for us all to be part of this discussion. Maybe it's time to look into the questions that are coming in and open the discussion to all participants.
Yes, yes, thank you, Miana. Thank you, Sonia and Odete. This was extremely interesting. We have already, I have a lot of questions myself, but I need to give the floor to other people, otherwise I'll take their time. So we have, first of all, a question from Andrew from Sterling. That goes to Odete. Andrew is asking who should check that the national systems are in order and working effectively?
Yeah, I think that there is a need in this area a very close cooperation between European institutions and national law enforcement, and the goal of the new strategy is to have a coordination between European Union level and national and at a national level in the European Union member states. The idea is to have a more coordination between the national law enforcement and at the European level, have a more closely coordination with Europol, Eurojust, Interpol, with the national law enforcement, to have a more coordination and to have a more effective intervention on this kind of issue that is online child sexual abuse.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Andre is also asking the opinion of Sonia on this. He wants to address the same question to Sonia as well.
I increasingly think, to be perfectly honest, that we are all better at developing guidelines and principles than at implementing and ensuring compliance. And it's what I see is quite a kind of mixed ecology of the ways in which compliance is slowly and gradually shifting. So I think there's no one answer to your question. Formally, when the general comment is adopted by the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, it will become part of the regular reporting requirements. So states will be expected to report on progress to the committee, but that's of course a long, a periodic process. And is not always, it's not that there's always good stories to tell. So I also see that much of the principles and guidance that is emerging are becoming the kind of normative basis for legal challenges, for awareness raising that leads many organizations to change their practice. And in some countries, there are kind of effective national bodies which are taking on the digital agenda as part of their underpinning for children's rights. But we also really do need a step change from the industry. And I think many in the technology industry are changing their practice and are taking on many of these ideas and seeing that there are brand opportunities and corporate social responsibility opportunities and just kind of doing good opportunities. But there are limits to that, and that's where we need to retain our kind of critical independent eye.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We have another question for both of you from Greece, from Remos. So the question is, how can we as professionals in the field prepare ourselves and in turn monitor on time those changes in order to maintain equal opportunities in digital accessing, knowledge attainment through technology, or prevent any risks for children? Any one of you, I don't know if Sonia would like to have the floor, and then.
Okay, it's a similar question in a way, but also different, because there are so many different organizations who traditionally have advocated children's rights and implemented children's rights, and they are facing so many challenges already that now have to also embrace this fast changing complex technology is very difficult. At the same time, I think there are many advocates of, as it were, human rights in relation to digitally expert NGOs and organizations, but they don't always pay attention to children. So I'm particularly excited when I see the intersection of these two kinds of knowledge, child rights and digital expertise. But a very simple rule of thumb, I think, for any organization when worrying about whether it's keeping up is to talk to children. because children are at the cutting edge and they will tell you what is the latest app. And if you ask them right, they will tell you the latest risk and the latest need that they have. So keep talking to children.
Excellent. Odete, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I just like to add that in this particular area, and I think it's important, the government role and the responsibility, because this is a new area that we are still learning. All of us are still learning about what is the digital world and what is the children's rights in this digital world, and the governments and talking specifically in the European Union level, the member states of the European Union need to take care of this issue, and the responsibility to learn more about, to have specific programs and actions for the digital world, and focusing on children's rights, because this is the organizations, the non-organizations are important in this issue, but still I think that the government are the main responsibles to take action on this area.
Thank you. We have a very interesting and I think difficult question from one of the attendees. His treatment staff, he works with drug users in Greece, Elias. So he's asking about the protection of the client files, especially when the clients are young people, children and adolescents, and whether organizations have the right to delete them, and if yes, how much time after the treatment? I think that this is a very sensitive issue. I don't know if you would like, it's both legal and of course it has to do a lot with the clinical work. Would you like to respond to that?
I don't know if I understand the questions. She is related to the GDPR?
Yes, it's related to the GDPR. The treatment organizations have to have their own clinical files for every adolescent, young child, or for adults who attend treatment. These files are there. These files are often digital. So do you have the right to keep them? Do we have to delete them to protect privacy? That's basically the question.
I think it depends on the legal framework of each country that we are talking about. I don't know.
I think you need a GDPR expert for this, but my understanding is GDPR's principle is special protections are needed for sensitive data, which this is, and the legal basis for keeping the data should be clear in terms of presumably this is a legitimate basis, but it should be the principle of data minimization is very strong in the GDPR, and so is the requirement for a risk impact assessment. So I think there are interesting questions for each organization about why data would be retained and exactly what risks there might be. So I think these are, and it may be that the relevant professional organizations will have their own requirements here.
Thank you. We have another question from Andrew. Is there a role for digital citizens in the implementation of the rights?
Absolutely. So for citizens, I would say. So you mean in the sense that young people are citizens? Yes. So it's interesting that, and Odete may have a different view, but the a Convention on the Rights of the Child does not charge the child with responsibilities, but with rights. But they are, of course, their rights include the right as a citizen to participate, to express themselves, and so forth. So there are many ways in which children themselves can enable and realize their rights in the digital world, and actually they are keen to do so. I've already said they could be consulted more because they have much of value to say. And children's consultations, for example, the one that we've done to accompany the general comment, are clear that children themselves would like to take on responsibilities, of course, depending on their evolving capacity and their circumstances. But they don't want this to be a matter in which everything is decided by the adults and then they are given whatever we decide. They absolutely want to be part of the process. And I think if included in a constructive and deliberative way, there are many exciting initiatives for peer mentoring, for example, of young people, of others, perhaps with difficulties online. Many great examples of how this can be done.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with Sonia. Yes, children's rights participation, it's very important, and we need to assure that they are they participate in this area of the digital environment issues, but have a say, and their contribution is taking real impact in what the outcome that can be from the consultation, because children have their own ideas and their own contribution, and we should give them the opportunity to participate and to value their contribution on the issues that we are consulting them. So I think the participation of children are very important, and we should take in great consideration.
Mm-hmm. I think by what you said, you somehow answered to another question about whether we should involve children in decisions of what is harmful. As you said before, their participation is very, very important.
Yeah.
And this will give some better results. Of course, we have many comments, many positive comments, and for all this session, and questions again about how we can, what can we do with the parents, the teachers, and how we can also involve them in becoming themselves aware of children's rights, but also have the skills to go forward. I think we have unfortunately to stop somewhere here, because we could stay for long, but we are 1 minute before closing. Would you like to make any last comments, Miana, first of all, and then
I would just like to thank you both speakers for being with us here today and answering all the questions. I see that maybe a few questions could be also postponed to be answered by both of you, but due to lack of time, I would suggest that we can post these questions on a forum thread in our MEDICI platform. Then if we can link speakers to that forum thread and find the answers and have them answered into that space, I think it would be great. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. Would you like to say something before closing, Sonia and Odete?
Yes. Yeah, Sonia. So.
Well, maybe just to reiterate my hope that people will respond to the consultation on the general comment on children's rights in the digital environment. It's there are many questions of implementation that are difficult and challenging, and if anyone is working with children, it would also be wonderful to have children's input at this point. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to thank and to say that children's rights is a reality, and in the digital world we have to make sure that children's rights is well implemented, and it's up to you and all of us to have this responsibility. I know that some key players are more responsible than others, but all of us, the society at all, are responsible, and for that children's rights in the digital world is a real promise, and no child left behind is the promise that we made in 2015 in the agenda to 2030. So I hope this turns in a real promise. So thank you once again for this invitation, and to make my contribution to this issue that I think is important.
Thank you both. It was really excellent. I wish we had more time. I think we would have spent here, 2 or 3 hours discussing about this. Thank you all the participants for staying with us. Don't forget to join our digital inclusion community. And don't forget that we have an upcoming surgery, online surgery on the 30th of September. You will receive more information about that. Thank you all. Bye. Bye-bye.